In Mark chapter 5, we're going to actually look at a lot of verses today, verses 1 through 20. So if you have it, Mark chapter 5, verse 1 through 20. Verse 1. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he will cry out loud, and he will cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and all the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave the region. As Jesus was sitting in the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. As we continue in this series of Jesus, the life and ministry of Jesus, we come to this event in chapter 5. And one of the things that we are trying to really, I think, establish and discover is the authority of Jesus. And I think this is a clear example where we see yet another case where Jesus has authority over something. And in this case, the evil spirit. But before we get to chapter 5, what happened in chapter 4 on the way to this location? Without looking at your Bible. Anyone remember? Okay, you can look. What happened in chapter 4? Just before this. They were on the lake. Something happened on the lake. There were waves, the wind, right? Jesus calms the storm in chapter 4. So Jesus has been teaching all day on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. They were kind of like on the other side. So they're on the western shore. We looked at the map many weeks ago. They're on the western shore. He's teaching. He gets in the boat and then he starts to head out. And on the way out, on the lake, on the Sea of Galilee, they were met by a very vicious storm, right? A fierce storm comes upon them. Waves are breaking over the boat. Water's coming in the boat. Disciples are panicking. Jesus is sleeping. They wake him up. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" You remember that story, right? So that's what happened. And when we leave chapter 4, the disciples are gripped with fear. They're thinking, what in the world did we just witness? Who is this guy? That even the wind and the waves obey him. And that's kind of the scene. You know, if it was a movie, right there, it would go black, right? As they're looking at each other. And the next scene would just kind of pop up as they're maybe focusing on this man. Right? They would turn their attention to the demon-possessed man that's waiting on the other side. The scene in chapter 4 is this event. And immediately after, when they land on shore, they're encountered by this demon-possessed man. With everything that happened on the way, with those events that took place. You know, the disciples were probably anxious and eager to get on land, right? After being in the storm, they want to just get on the land and kind of maybe even get away from Jesus a little bit because they have no idea, because they were afraid. They were terrified. Maybe just get away from him and just say, who is this guy? But when they land, no chance for that. Why? Because a demon-possessed man comes running down from the hillside among the tombs. He runs down. You see, he sees this boat approaching from a distance. He begins to see this boat coming towards, and he lands. And as he is, from a distance, he recognizes Jesus, we're told. So he runs down, he falls down his knees, and he asks him, Jesus, what do you want with me? Son of the Most High God. As Jesus and his disciples land, as this man comes down, I think it startled the disciples a little bit. They probably, took a step back of what's going on. But this guy, he's fixated on Jesus, and he begins to ask Jesus that question. This guy, what we know about him is that he lived among the tombs. Okay? He lived in the tombs along the shores up in the hillside. We know that he was an outcast because he didn't live in the town. Where was his family? We don't know. Maybe because of his condition, he had to leave home, or he was kicked out, or whatever reasons. He was alone, and we're told that these demons had tormented him. And how do we know this? Because day and night, he cried and he cut himself with stones. The demons had a control over him, and they led him to cut himself with stones. Day and night. The town people, they obviously didn't know what to do with him. They tried to subdue him, as Mark tells us that they have often tried to chain him, hand and feet, but he just broke through them. He had no control. He had the physical strength to break through those things. He was kind of wandering aimlessly out in the hillside, alone. What do you want with me? Verse 7, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. And this verse actually, it reveals a little bit about not just this demon here, but demons in general. James chapter 2, verse 19, it says this, you believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe and shudder. The fact that the demons know and recognize Jesus is not a shock to us. They know who Jesus is. They recognize him. But this man who is possessed by a legion of demons, we're told, he was a man in need. Why did Jesus come across to the other side? His encounter, his time on shore is very, very short. I wonder, did he come across for this guy? Mark obviously doesn't tell us, but I wonder, why did Jesus come all the way across this lake? Was it to experience the storm, to demonstrate power over the storm, to demonstrate power and to really restore or heal this guy? This was a Gentile region. I don't know how much time the disciples ever came over to this area. How do we know that this was a Gentile region? Well, there was a herd of 2,000 pigs. The Jews do not, they consider the pigs to be unclean animals. So they never tended, to the sheep. They don't actually touch them at all. So if you remember the story of the prodigal son, the younger son, what does he do? He goes out, he takes his inheritance, he goes out into a distant land, we're told. And we know that the distant land was probably a Gentile area because he ends up, after he blows through all of his money, he ends up working for somebody feeding pigs. Whenever whenever a pig is present, you know that is not a Jewish home, Jewish community, Jewish region. 2,000, the herd of pigs. This was, the region of the Gerasenes was primarily inhabited by Gentiles. that probably is part of the background of what they do at the end of this passage. Demon possession. Now, in 2016, when we talk about the demon possession or demonic, some people are thinking, why do we talk about this? There's, I think, at least 3 camps when it comes to this topic of demon possession or the demonic. One, some people believe that it just doesn't exist today. That whole demon possession thing is not real. It's actually, they associate it more with mental illness or some kind of a disorder. Second, I think, is some people believe that this is a phenomenon that really is only, that we see only in biblical times. With Jesus, all of these kind of ceased. And I think a third camp is that they still believe in this today. And depending on where you stand on that spectrum, when you see someone who demonstrates something that's off, people will either attribute it to demon possession or they would attribute it to a mental disorder. Because that's kind of the theological stance that they have. This man, we're told by Mark, he wasn't suffering from a mental disorder. He was demon possessed. He wasn't crazy. Jesus clearly recognized that he was not in his mind and that there was some other force that was controlling him. So that's why he says, come out of him. But Jesus asks a very interesting thing. This is one of the few cases where we see Jesus is kind of interacting with the demon. What is your name? He asks that he always refers to the demon before verse 9. He always refers to him in a singular way. What is your name? Right? Come out of him. But the response that we get is, my name is Legion, for we are many, the demon says. A Roman legion was made up of 6,000 men. Okay? When a Roman soldier or Roman army, when it talks about a legion, that is 6,000 men. Was there 6,000? We don't know. But we simply know, I think the demon was simply referring to himself or giving himself the name Legion to represent there were many. That there were many demons that had taken possession or control over this guy. And there's something very interesting happens here. They begin to plead with Jesus, do not take us out of this area. And we don't have the time this morning to really unpack that a little bit, but some people believe that demons have this area, a region that they are kind of responsible to bring terror or whatever. And when these demons, what they're saying is, don't send us out of this area. Anything is better than for us than to go back and face the possible wrath of being expelled out of this area. We want to stay in this area. And so they ask for permission to go among the pigs. And there's another thing here. It's like, what? Demons? They possess animals? There's a whole bunch of things that are going on here. They ask for this, and Jesus gives them permission. Who can give permission but the one who has authority? If I don't have authority over something, you can ask me for permission. I say, okay, go for it. But that's meaningless. I can give you guys, somebody, you can say, Pastor John, you know what, today when I go home today, I don't want to stop at any stop sign or red lights. I bless you. That means nothing, because a police officer will pull you over and say, you just ran a red light. Oh, but my pastor said today that it's okay. Okay, good. Here's a ticket for you. See, you can give permission, but the one who gives permission without authority, it means nothing. Jesus gave permission because he had the authority over the demons. And when he permitted them to do what they requested, to go into the pigs, they did. And what we're told is that the pigs, of herd of about 2,000, they rushed down the banks of the shore, and they jumped in to what they call the lake, which is the Sea of Galilee. Who can give permission but the one who has authority? The calming of the storm and this event in a span of a few hours, it was an ultimate demonstration of Jesus' power and his authority for his disciples. Just think about if you were in the disciples' shoes. You listened to him teach some great and amazing things. Get on the lake. You thought you were going to die. He calms the storm, and you're left wondering, what in the world just happened? Who is this guy? And then they land on shore, and this crazy man, demon-possessed man comes, and he just simply casts them out. And then they go in the pigs, and the pigs run down. And they drown. Imagine what they just witnessed. The people who were tending the pigs, they run off back to the town. They tell the people, and everyone comes out to kind of investigate to see what happened. And when they arrived, they are now swept with fear. They can't believe what they are witnessing or what they see. They see this normal person. Can this really be the same guy? You know those moments when you look at something and you kind of have to take a double take, right? You're like, wait, because it just can't be. I think there was a lot of that going on here. They come and they're like, wait a minute, this looks like this guy. What we are told is that he was in his right mind. He was dressed, which means he was undressed before. Sitting in his right mind. When they saw him, they were afraid. That's not the response that we're accustomed to seeing. When we see a miracle of Jesus, we're not usually accustomed to hearing about fear. But here in Mark's Gospel, in chapter 4 and 5, both times when Jesus does something, the result is fear. I think one of the reasons why it is fear is because it was so amazing. It was so out of our normal idea. We can accept. I think it's beyond our maybe level of tolerance or acceptance. We can get at somebody who's, last week as we looked at a shriveled hand, okay, that's great. That was a physical healing. But when it comes to the supernatural, we think, I don't know about that. The people are afraid. What were they afraid of? Apparently, they were afraid of Jesus. It's the exact same response as the disciples. Then they were told about the pigs and what happened to all of them. Then on top of what they see, a changed man, they plead with Jesus to leave the region. Why did they ask him to leave? And this is the question that I think will go down for me in terms of just constantly processing this. Why did they ask him to leave? I think most of the time, I think people always point to two possible reasons when they look at this text. One is an economic loss. What that means is that the pigs were most likely their livelihood, meaning that they raised pigs to sell them. And that was kind of how they made their living. And when they rushed down, when they got possessed and ran down and drowned, all of a sudden a herd of 2,000 pigs were gone. Their livelihood was gone. It was a significant economic loss. They were afraid that Jesus would bring further economic loss to their city, to their town, and maybe perhaps their region. So they asked him to leave. Second one is that they simply could not comprehend what just happened. These people didn't understand what happened. They couldn't, in their mind, wrap around, in their mind, what just happened. To them, this mysterious Jewish visitor that kind of came in onto their land, he did something that they've never heard of before, they've never seen before. A guy that they tried to control for who knows how long was restored in his right mind. They were not familiar with Jesus. He was very foreign to them. They hadn't heard of the stories of the miraculous healings, the authoritative teachings. What they saw didn't make sense. They were afraid. And because they didn't understand, because they didn't know who Jesus was and they were afraid of him, they asked him to leave. These are generally the two, I think, reasons why people believe that they let him go, asked him to leave. But they plead with him. And when I read this story, I am saddened by this decision. What a lost opportunity for them is kind of what I think. Fear is not necessarily a bad thing. Fear causes us to be cautious. It helps us to stay out of trouble oftentimes. However, fear can also keep us from experiencing something amazing as well. Fear of the unknown really led the people to chase Jesus away. In some ways, fear is lack of faith, lack of trust. These people allowed fear to chase Jesus away. And Jesus, he doesn't stay where he's not wanted. He gets back in the boat. And when I see them getting back in the boat, I'm thinking, wow, how excited are the disciples to get back in that boat? They want to spend some time on the land, but they're chased away. Get back on the boat. But one guy also, whereas they might be reluctant to get on the boat, there's one guy who is eager to get on the boat. And it's this guy who was healed. He begs Jesus to go, and Jesus says, no. Look at verse 19. Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. Jesus says no. He rejects a potential disciple. In many cases, in many of the healings, not just up to Mark 5 and beyond, after healing, Jesus says, don't tell anybody. Here, this guy wants to come. He says, no, you can't. But you know what? Go and tell people. Once again, I think the Gentile region that he's at, Jesus wants him to go and share the news. In Mark chapter 7, verse 31 through 8, verse 10, Jesus returns to the Decapolis, to this region. And when he returns, and when we read that story in Mark 7 and Mark 8, Jesus is very well received. Many people believe that he is well received because of the testimony of this guy. He actually went out and did what Jesus told him to do, which Mark tells us. And many people were what? Amazed. Here's that word again. They were amazed. This guy, he did what Jesus asked him to do. Jesus said, go out and tell people what the Lord has done, how he has showed you mercy. And he does it. And his testimony is so amazing that people, they hear now a story of Jesus. So that when Jesus comes back to this region, he is well received. And actually, he does healings. Miracles take place because of this guy's testimony. We are to share what Jesus has done for us. Don't let an opportunity go by. I've had moments where I let an opportunity pass by, and I regret it even to this day. I can think of at least a few examples where I felt like the Lord set it up. Everything was set up, and I said, oh, that's too bad. Well, I hope things get better. And I just gotta walk away. We cannot let an opportunity pass. Joyfully, courageously, and boldly, we are to do what Jesus told this guy. Proclaim all that Jesus has done for each of us. How he has shown us mercy.